Thank you for being here, and I am going to be talking about K-12 education, how educational freedom is working for students, for families, and for America. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, we're in college, or we're recent college graduates. We know there are problems there. K-12 education, been there, done that. So why on earth are we talking about K-12 education? Well, here's why. Whether or not you have kids yet, or you plan to be parents in the near future, one of the biggest parts of our budget in any state, no matter where we're from, is going to be K-12 education. So you're paying for it, I'm paying for it, we're all paying for it. So let's see what's really going on. Because how many people, raise your hands, have heard that education, K-12 education in this country is underfunded? Who's heard that? Okay, we're going to put that theory to a test. So let's start off with a really radical idea. Government does not know best. Now, we could stop right there, couldn't we? We could fill in the blank with virtually anything. But government certainly doesn't know best when it comes to educating other people's children. Certainly not 50 million school children across the United States of America right now. Milton Friedman, we all know him. Have you heard of him? You've heard of him before, right? So radical idea, education spending essentially will be more efficient if the ones who earn the money actually spend the money for their children. Just like everything else. Everything else. The laws of economics, common sense, do not stop because we're talking about education. So we'll recall that back in 1955, Milton Friedman suggested, similar to Thomas Paine, by the way, that instead of we fund money through government, right? But that doesn't mean government should control what happens in classrooms across the United States. Why don't we give those who can't afford to pay for their children's education vouchers? Ooh, I'm in California and I said that V word. We have to be very careful of our language in California, so please help me out. I don't want to be arrested by the language police. But I will say voucher. Voucher, 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 voucher. So this idea, by the way, didn't originate with Milton Friedman. We'll see where it came from. So if government doesn't know best, who does? Well, I have a suggestion. How about children's parents? Let's try that. Well, that's crazy talk. Parents, we can't have parents running amok, picking their children's schools. They're not certified. They haven't gone through training programs. I mean, that just sounds like insanity. These are the sorts of arguments you are going to hear. By the way, I'm not going to go through all these programs. I'm not going to read all the research to you. So during Q&A, you can ask me, hey, what does this mean? So we are now embarking at a point in our country's history where parents are taking back control from the quote-unquote experts. Did you know that right now, vouchers are 150 years old? Let's see, I think I blew back. See right down there? 1869. Maine and Vermont started with vouchers. Ooh, you want to get some, only one type of school for everybody, folks upset? Tell them that. Watch their heads explode. We also now, I'm going to focus on private parental choice. We can talk about charter schools, we can talk about homeschooling, we can talk about virtual schooling, anything you want, but I'm going to focus on this because this is the most controversial, so it's the most fun. We have had vouchers for 150 years. By the way, we'll get to that, I'm jumping ahead of myself. We've had vouchers for 150 years. We have had tax credit scholarships. My home state of Arizona was the first one to have them. Thank you very much. Just like vouchers, the only thing that's different is that they are privately financed through voluntary contributions. No taxpayers are harmed in the financing of those scholarships. I'm also proud to say that in 2011, my home state of Arizona was the first to enact an education savings account. How many people in here have heard of health savings accounts? Remember those? Aren't they wonderful? Well, it works the same way. Essentially, you have money in your account for education. Parents who, for whatever reason, do not prefer a government school for their child, and if they are eligible, the state deposits what it would have sent to the school district into that child's account instead. Guess what parents do with it? They go ahead and pay for tutoring, special education therapies, testing fees, online courses. So Arizona started out limiting the program to special education children. And don't we always hear, oh, special education is so expensive, we can't afford it because we are underfunded with education, right? Well, I did a back of the envelope calculation. After, I can only take so much of that before I almost lose my mind, and I have to start running some numbers. By my calculation, the average special needs parent with an education savings account that wasn't all of the money, it wasn't all the local, it wasn't all the federal. So these special education parents had an average of about $5,000 left over at the end of the year. And you know what the beauty part is of an education savings account? It's not like government accounting, where you use it or you lose it. So around the end of September, you want to get some good deals, go to some government agency or military base, because they have to get rid of all this stuff so they can buy new stuff to show that they need money. Great way to get a bargain. With ESAs, however, parents can roll it over from one year to the next. So you know what you get? A college savings account. So think of all those beautiful, great incentives. So it's working for families. That's what we have available. So I'm not going to do a breakdown. But wait a minute. Here's a problem. We can't let parents choose their children's schools. Because as Meryl Streep from The Giver tells us, when people have the freedom to choose, they choose wrong. I hear this so many times. It's actually called what I call the stupid parent myth. See, now it would be okay for me to have choice, but you can't have choice because you would choose wrong, which means you wouldn't make the same choice I would make. So that's what we're dealing with. So let's break down that myth a little bit more, shall we? There are three major problems. For me, that's the core argument against parental choice in education. There sure are a heck of a lot more. That, to me, is the core one. There are three major problems with it. Number one, it's illogical. Number two, it's inconsistent. And number three, it is downright hypocritical. Let's see why. Oh, look. That is a sharp-looking group of folks right there. That's what that is. We are letting millions of 18-year-olds run around this country using public dollars to go to private schools. The horror, the humanity. They're called Pell Grants. One thing that makes me absolutely bananas is when I'm dealing with elected officials, and this has actually happened at the state level. You go into the higher education committee. Oh, we need more money for Pell Grants because that's going to make college affordable. Everybody, thank goodness in this room, we don't have to go through you know why there's no such thing as free college. You know why college is so expensive. Check out the rate since 1958 when the federal government started getting involved. Okay, so Pell Grants, you're in this committee, higher ed committee, Pell Grants are great. Ooh, boo. K-12 committee, we couldn't possibly let adults use public dollars to send their children to schools of their choice. That is insane, because you want to know why? Those parents out there, all of you people who are going to be future parents, would likely pick School of the Jihad and the white supremacist school. Just as a matter of clarification, You cannot have schools like that that would be recognized in any state. No such school would ever be eligible for a parental choice program. Just saying, but let's not get facts, in the way of a really, really great story. So here's when it gets really, so not only is it illogical, we'll let 18-year-olds do it, it's inconsistent because these adults can do it, but these adults can't. Here's where it's downright hypocritical. This marvelous lady is she's since passed away, unfortunately. The late Polly Williams was instrumental in getting the country's first modern voucher program enacted in Milwaukee. By the way, most parental choice programs, I think everybody should have choice, but most parental choice programs target low-income children in horrible schools and unsafe schools. I love this. Bill and Hillary Clinton should not be the only folks living in public housing who get to send their child to a private school. Amen. God love her, God bless her. Because we all know that Chelsea went to Sidwell Friends, a very exclusive private school in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, participates in the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, a wonderful voucher program that former President Obama tried to take away. For the children, of course, even though his kids, yeah, exactly. See, the hypocrisy is just horrific. So what I want to do, this is all fun and games, but we are people of reason. Let's look at the evidence, okay? Now, I want to start off, because we're going to be going through spending. I want to put on the record that I do not oppose spending. And if Mr. Alger were here, he would almost break his neck nodding in agreement. I have no problem spending money. I have a problem when we don't get value for our hard-earned dollars. So you make the call, sports fans. Right now, the average per pupil cost, that's all the money, I'm not putting some money in, taking some money out, not looking. This is all the money on average we spend per pupil per year in K-12. Think of what you would spend with $14,000. What would you do? So what that adds up to being is after 13 years of K-12 education, that works out on average to $182,000. By the way, here in California, that would be well over $200,000. California spends more. Those are the results. Now, I'm not playing with the results. This comes from the U.S. Department of Education, the seat of all educational wisdom and knowledge. Now, I broke it down between poor and non-poor students, because one of the big excuses we have is that, the reason why our public schools aren't doing well is because of poor children. That is a fallacy, and we're going to see the evidence about that in a moment. So what we can tell is right now, less than half of non-poor kids, by the time they're seniors in high school, aren't proficient. By the way, proficient, we're not saying rocket scientist. We're not saying, the next Nobel laureate in literature. No, this is basic stuff. Just proficient. So that's what we're dealing with after spending an average of $182,000. Well, listen, Alger, that's not fair. You can't pick a point in time and maybe, kids were having a bad year. Being so unreasonable. Okay, let's look at it since 1970. By the way, I'm sure you're all getting excited and you're all preparing because the U.S. Department of Education turns 40 in May. So start the parades now. Plan, send out your save the dates because we're all excited. Midlife crisis, here we come. Okay. So look at the trends, by the way. Since 1970, that big line going like this, that's the spending. By the way, that's not funny money. It's not democracy dollars. Those are actual real inflation-adjusted dollars. So spending is nearly doubled. See all those dots down by the zero for science, reading, and math? I give you more subjects, but it doesn't go back that far. That shows what the achievement gains were, the improvements. Big goose egg. So All right, we know that government doesn't know best, certainly when it comes to educating children at an exorbitant price. Okay, let's see if Milton Friedman's right. I am not going to go through all more than 140 studies showing that they're right. By the way, this isn't just, ooh, I threw out a study. The only studies I included are considered gold standard studies, random assignment. I like to walk out just a little bit, but I promise I'll read it back in. Gold standard random assignment studies or matched studies, meaning that you have representative samples of children, so we have very high confidence levels that the results are because of the programs, not some other factor. So this isn't, some of the phony baloney science we see covered in the newspapers so often. Okay, let's go through, and I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Most students, we see a majority of the studies find that scholarship student test scores go up. But it's not just scores, because we're more than a score. High school graduation rates, college admission rates, college completion rates are all higher compared to their peers. And this is one thing that people worry about, that, oh, what about the students who are left behind? This is proof positive that competition works. Competition does not make our lives easier, does it? It makes us better. And Phoenix was actually ground zero of a study, because Arizona has pretty much every kind of choice you can imagine. When you have to compete for students and their education dollars, people all of a sudden ship up and do better, and that's good for everybody. So I'm just going to flip through these quickly. Parental satisfaction is up. By the way, these are real parents. I happen to know the folks in the top right corner, so these aren't just, shopped photos. These are actual parents. What about civic values? Well, you can only learn about, how great America is in government schools, right? Isn't that true? If you go to those evil private schools, you're going to be, you fill in the blank, and it's so much nonsense. But even integration. So you're saying that when you stop assigning people to schools based on where they can afford to live, things get more diverse, and you don't have to bus kids from all over the place. Wow, freedom just seems to be winning today. Also, the fiscal effects. That's something you hear too. Choice is going to drain public schools that are already underfunded. Okay, flip back a couple of slides. $182,000 per kid. So the fiscal effects, what we actually find is that even though you're talking about private schools actually, from the taxpayer's perspective, cost less than district public schools. They just do, and that's been shown again and again and again. Particularly the private schools, especially faith-based schools that participate in parental choice programs. Look at that spending. But wait a minute, that makes no sense. Not wearing my glasses, so I should better get closer to make sure I'm being accurate. So you're telling me that as a share of total education spending, parental choice programs, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, less than 0.5% of combined K-12 public school and choice program spending. That's what I call a bargain, particularly when you look at children who, for whatever reason, by the way, people often say, Alger, you're so mean. Why do you hate government schools? That's terrible. My kids go to government schools. You know why? It's the best, it has the best offering for them. And that's what choice is all about. See, unlike Obamacare, with parental choice in education, if you like your child's school, you can keep your child's school. Now, I want to wrap it up so you can ask questions, but some things people always ask me is, how do we even start with education? It's one of those big, hairy furballs of a policy problem. If I can give you one piece of advice, know your numbers. Again, education isn't some big, define the laws of physics and gravity and sense. Know your numbers. Want to know how teachers, for example, could make over $100,000? When would that happen? It could happen now if we had choice and we actually had a market for education. One of the I think the core problem is we don't have a market for education. Who wants to go get a gallon of milk? There's a market for milk. Do you want cow milk? Half %, this percent, soy milk, almond milk. There's a market for something as innocuous as milk. Coffee. Going to the Starbucks, I'm almost getting off the plane. I'm like, I'm not ready for this. Wait a minute, too many choices. Although I don't believe in there can be too many choices. I'm like, this is terrific. Why can't we have that in education? With education savings accounts, we can. With the real experts, parents in charge of education funding, we can. So know your budgets. These are the resources I use. EdChoice, Institute for Justice, American Federation for Children. Also know your state-based think tank. Every state has a free market, liberty-minded think tank. Go to State Policy Network or SPN. If you want to know if you're going to the right spot, just look at all these, oh no, Right Wing Watch and all these, folks. It's like, oh, free markets, okay, I'm going to the right place. Share resources with your family and friends because you look so mean. People usually come to me for like interviews when they're like, oh, who are we going to get who opposes preschool? Oh, call Alger, she'll oppose anything. And it's not that I oppose everything. I am for complete options. If you want preschool, go have preschool, but don't tell me the only preschool I can have is government run. If you want more K-12, I'm all for it. More power to you. But don't tell me it's just government schools. It's just, exactly. Exactly. And as a taxpayer, I trust parents a heck of a lot more than I trust politicians and their special interest friends. Let's face it, we remember the scores. You can't do much worse. What are you afraid of? So those are resources I look to if you're interested in education. My email is up here. Just go to independent.org. Alger, I'm there. Email me. But know your numbers, because one of the biggest things you're going to hear is we're underfunding education. Do you know that we actually spend more? Because I check this every year. It's one of those fun stats I like to put out. We spend more as a country on government K-12 education than we do Department of Defense spending, which ticks me off as a Navy wife. My husband's a veteran. My eldest son just became a Marine. And so that really, and look at the performance of our all voluntary military compared to government schools, which by the way still conscript children. Look what happens to you if you don't enroll your children. Every state has a compulsory education law. So I would also say know the facts. There should be not one legislative session. California's going to start back up in January. Arizona starts in January. Most states starts in January. You should get friends together. You should be calling, emailing, hounding your lawmakers at least every week, because I know you're still in school, but get people to call and hound them every day. You should also consider running for school board. Seriously, you want to know what gets the least attention, but where the majority of the money in any given state is spent, at your school boards. And if you want to get a sense for, gosh, where are they spending money and you can't look at it every month, try around May or April. Whenever your state decides its budget, about 2 months ahead of time, start looking at the minutes of your school boards. It will blow your mind. Nobody pays attention, and the programs and the spending. You want to know where your money's going? Get to the school board or watch it online. Some states do that. But finally, you're not alone. Look around you. One of my favorite things about Turning Point USA is you feel so isolated where you are. You're not. Not only is everybody here, you have connections all across the country. So I'm going to wrap it up, but please stay connected. Please send me any questions, but seriously, do consider running for office. It's not as scary as it sounds. Please try it, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have. So let's fix K-12 education in the next 10 minutes, shall we? Thank you all.
Hi, so I went to private school for K through 12 education. My K through 8 school was maybe 300 students max. My high school, I think, peaked at 130. I remember going to take the SAT at the big state school state high school, and I was just floored with how big everything was. All the buildings are huge. They have an entire huge football stadium. They have like multiple fields for everything. Do you think that like schools are trying to do too much right now, like with sports programs, with like food programs, with all this other stuff they're supposed to do in addition to education?
I think that's an excellent question. My answer is a resounding yes. Absolutely. I look at my, where my stepsons go to school, there's the big typical public high school with the sports field, room for a pony, the, the auditorium that is, I think rock bands could, record there. Yet right up the street is a public charter school. And it's actually one of the top ranked in the country. By the way, that charter school went up in less than 9 months. And the reason why it goes up in less than 9 months is because they focus on, this is what we need. And there's a science to it. The hall should be this big, you only need this room, and we're not paying for all the other bells and whistles. Here's the thing, a lot of parents will say, well, you don't send your child to a traditional school setting. What about prom? What about the football program? I'm like, we have Pop Warner, we have parks, we have civic groups, we have private organizations. School doesn't need to be everything. But one thing on the flip side, and I'm going to say it, some of our biggest problems are Republican lawmakers. Well, I just want to make a mandate that everybody has to have financial literacy class, or I just want this mandate or that mandate. Stop it. I don't care how great it is, it's not great to impose that on the school. So that's a good question, and yes, yes, yes.
So my question revolves around, in Arizona, there was a Red for Ed movement.
Yes,
And I was wondering if you could give a little bit of a background on that and a little bit of statistics on that, so I can debate my teachers and stuff.
Oh, and we can be in touch. We can be in touch. Okay, Red for Ed. Remember the spring before last, several states were rocked with the teacher strike over teacher pay. But people don't go into teaching for the money. It's not about the money, but we're just going to strike about it. If you can't tell, I'm a little bitter because, not just in principle, I'm bitter in principle. 3 of my kids at home for a week. Now, I love them, that's great. But my husband and I, we were able to make it work. I work from home, and my husband telecommuted. Boy, the kids are really excited. It's like, great, a double whammy. We're going to be doing more at home than we ever do in school. You didn't know what contract you signed? The Arizona Republic did a story about a teacher who said, I know I signed a contract for $36,000, but I didn't understand what that meant. Then why are you teaching my kids? You're not qualified. Here's the reality, and I won't get into all the Arizona stuff. I can certainly give you the Arizona, I can bury you in Arizona-specific statistics, and you can bury, opponents. We could be paying Arizona teachers right now over $100,000, and in 30 seconds or less, I will tell you how. On average, per pupil spending, the whole kit and caboodle is $10,000 per student. Most teachers will say that they have 30 kids in their class. 30 times 10,000 is $300,000. Let's use this isn't private sector, so we're going to take 50% in admin instead of just the no more than 20% that we would everywhere else. Take 50% for admin, overhead, books, and whatever bells and whistles you want. What does that leave? $150,000 per teacher. By the way, something specific to Arizona that I'm sure is applicable in other states, our own Auditor General found that if districts and school boards simply spent what they used to spend before we had a tax increase that a Republican just extended, there would be over $420 million left. Not more money, we just spent the same percentage in the classroom. There would be over $400 million for teachers. But you don't want these superintendents who are making $250,000 base salary to get their noses out of joint, so we don't do that. So I hope that answers your question. I'll be happy to talk more with you further. And if anyone has any more questions, I'll be around. I'll be happy to talk to you. But thank you guys.